Well, as I mentioned in the previous video, this is the video on sovereignty. There's actually quite a bit involved in this. If you go to the Insight book under sovereignty, you'll see that there's many pages dedicated to sovereignty and how Watchtower is really developing the satanic thing. And Jane Doe and I, we've had a conversation about this, and she's going to do a little bit of this, but she preferred that I focus on what I'm focusing on right here, because this really has a lot to do with the serpent in the garden. Now, if you'll recall to mind, I'm not going to go find it because most of us can remember it once I start quoting it. And I believe it's in either 1st or 2nd Timothy or something that the Apostle Paul wrote, where he talked about just as the serpent thoroughly deceived Eve. And I want to play upon those words, thoroughly deceived Eve. In the world of Christianity, I can just about bet that you can ask any Christian, even those doing YouTubes from other denominations, when Paul stated, just as the serpent thoroughly deceived Eve, how does your religious business scheme try to help you understand how thoroughly or what that deception was? To my knowledge, Watchtower is the only religious business scheme that even tries to offer some sort of explanation as to the deceptive means that the Satan used against Eve. Now, I've done a video in the past. When you read that Bible more thoroughly in Genesis chapter 3, the Satan did not deceive Eve with the words, "You positively will die, for God knows that in the very day you eat of its fruit, your eyes are bound to be open, you're bound to be like God, knowing good and bad." And then God comes down, according to Watchtower's latest theology, Jesus comes down and asks, "What is it that you've done?" You know, when their eyes were open to the fact that they were now naked. And the conversation ensues. Well, Jesus goes back to heaven and says, "Now that the man has become like one of us, let's drive him out of the garden so that he doesn't also eat from the tree of life and live forever." It wasn't a lie. The Satan knew that tree was there. The only thing that the Satan didn't do is say, hey, as soon as you eat this, you better get your asses over to the other tree and eat from it too. Satan didn't lie. But in the religious realm, in the religious nonsense that's in the Holy Bible, Apostle Paul says, just as the serpent thoroughly deceived Eve. So would you guys like to see what Watchtower offers up as a possible explanation to what that trick, what that deception actually was? And once again, I have to hand it to another circuit overseer that brought this up in one of our circuit overseer visits when we was in Cottonwood. Go get your Insight to the Scriptures, volume number 2, under sovereignty, page 1010. And as I read this, for some of you non-Jehovah Witness ministers or YouTube content creators trying to help Jehovah's Witnesses wake up, ask your ministers, your church fathers, what kind of possible explanation do they have for Eve being thoroughly deceived? They're going to ask, well, what even causes you to question that? All right, this is what they write, page 110, second column, and we have it highlighted right here in pink. This is where I'm going to be reading from. Whether it, speaking of the serpent, whether it ate of the forbidden fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and bad, and then appeared to be made wise, able to speak, is not stated. Now think about that, guys. Jesus had already told Eve, Adam and Eve, if you even touch the tree, you're going to die. Well, first of all, there's a fear control mechanism. It wasn't obedience, it was fear. Think about it. So anyhow, so what if Eve, by chance, happened to be sent out because, Adam, being perfect, is having a one-on-one conversation with the divine Lord Jesus. And, since men have to talk among men, and you wouldn't want a woman there because women have already been told to sit down, shut up, learn in silence. So Jesus is having this private conversation with Adam. And Adam says, hey, go get us some food. So she wanders around and she comes up near to the tree and she happens to see the serpent biting the fruit. And then she begins to realize, hey, the serpent ain't dying. In fact, I gotta go have a better look-see. And then Eve gets closer and sees that the serpent is maybe eating on the fruit, and the serpent's not dying, but instead it appears to be made wise. Now the serpent, the snake, begins to talk. Now, Watchtower says it's not stated. Going on, the rebellious angel using the serpent to speak to her presented, as she supposed, the opportunity to become independent, to be like God, knowing good and bad, and succeeded in convincing her she would not die. That's a good possible explanation. In my mind, that's how a thoroughly well-out deception, magician's trick could be played on Eve. Make that serpent eat the fruit. The serpent ain't dying. Now the serpent's become wise. And the serpent can now talk. So not only was Eve deceived, because she already knew snakes didn't talk. She already knew that. She had to have known that. But now all of a sudden, it begins to talk. It was made wise. Isn't that how somebody could be thoroughly deceived? Now, don't get me wrong, guys. I don't believe this bullshit. But Jehovah's Witnesses and Christians do. Because then God turns right around and talks to the snake himself. So, just as deceptive as that is, the deception continues on because ultimately that whole Garden of Eden deception has to do with destroying the nature of the divine feminine. That's what that's all about. I mean, even Father Abraham gave way to cowardice when he told Sarah, don't tell anybody that you're my wife. Tell everybody that you're my sister, because if you tell them my wife, surely they're going to kill me. Abraham had a yellow streak down his back. And I find it interesting for him, a man that went through the land of Canaan and destroyed all these cities and gave 10% of the booty to Melchizedek. He wasn't afraid then. Nobody reads these stories to free themselves from talking snakes, from talking donkeys, from cowardice men, from the lies and the contradictory nature of this book. Now, I recently watched a video from Ryan Tastic, and I've really been enjoying what she's doing, talking about the Canaanites and everything like this. And without getting into any detailed descriptions, these are things that I have long concluded on my own. When Jesus was talking about going back to heaven, his disciples asked, are you going to restore the kingdom at this time? What kingdom were his disciples quarrying about? What kingdom? And then Jesus says, my kingdom is no part of this world, when before Pilate. What kingdom were they looking forward to have restored? Well, it obviously has to do with the Canaanite kingdom in the pantheon of gods. When you read this Bible very slow, very carefully, and very insightfully, whose kingdom did the Israelites go out of their way to destroy? It's the kingdom of the Canaanites, the kingdom of the Philistines, the kingdom that believed in the pantheon of gods that also included the divine feminine, the worship of the divine feminine. What you see in the Garden of Eden with the talking snake is the destruction of the divine feminine and the complete overtake of the male ego. Now, I held up the Revelation book. I don't know if anybody really saw it when I did it, but if you take a look at the camera right now, you'll see the picture that I'm going to refer to. The Revelation book, pages 316 and 317. Now, I know the Watchtower Babel Crap Society portray the 144,000 as the bride class of mankind. And I know that Christianity goes out of the way to portray the divine feminine as heavenly Jerusalem. But in all reality, and in this picture, and I've said it before, peace will never come to humankind until men get rid of their bullshit egos. And in the previous video, quit looking at the dollar bill as your God. But even Watchtower knows in pictorial form, right here, this is the restoration of the divine feminine. The kingdom that Christ is allegedly gonna restore. It has to include the divine feminine, who Ryan, in her really short video, points to in the Canaanite pantheon, included the divine feminine. Upon careful reading of the Bible, you can see it. You can see it even when Michelangelo, I think, painted, or Leonardo da Vinci, whichever one it was, it escapes me at this moment, painted the Last Supper. There appears to be a female, the divine feminine, at that Last Supper. She's always been there, friends, but the male ego has destroyed her, going all the way back to that story in the Garden of Eden. So when the disciples asked Jesus, are you going to restore the kingdom at this time? What kingdom were they talking about? Obviously, it has to be the kingdom of the Canaanites, because when you read the Bible, like I just previously stated, it's the Israelites that went through and destroyed the kingdom of the Canaanites. It's all right there. It's all right in front of you, but you have to get rid of that bullshit ego before you're willing to see it, willing to acknowledge it. So thank you, Ryan, for what you've been doing, because I've been intrigued, because many of the things that you've mentioned in those shorts, I've already concluded. I just didn't want to be the only one out here really saying it because I already know that how half of this community find what I'm doing is disgusting. How do you know? Just listen to them. Just listen to them. They'll go out of their way to try to debunk this, not so much in public, but they'll do it on their ex-Jehovah's Witness Bible discussions forum. And I've long said this. You'll never find us over there because they don't want us there. They don't want to discuss the Bible. They only want to discuss theology. But in that theology, you have to restore the divine feminine, because the divine male ultimately cannot succeed without the divine feminine. See, that divine feminine, even in the Bible and even in Watchtower's concept, was supposed to be a compliment. And men, because of the male ego bullshit, relegates the divine feminine to second place. That's why you read in the Bible, I desire the women to sit down and learn in silence. Be obedient to your husband. In fact, didn't even Sarai call Abram my Lord? The bullshit's right there, guys. The bullshit is right there. Thanks for watching, and have a blessed day, and may that divine feminine be part of that blessing for you. Bye.